Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, I was, just like sleeping here on the couch in my parents' house, and I woke up to all these tweets that were like, "Oh, they got the guy." And of course, this has been something that everyone in Pullman has been following, everyone in the whole Pullman Moscow area. And so, I look on my phone and I see the guy's name and I see the picture. And I'm thinking that looks a lot like my TA, who's also named Brian, but that would be crazy. And so I went and I checked my email, to see the emails I'd had with him and the name matched and everything. And yeah, it was just like totally jarring, totally shocking to realize that this person that had been, kind of grading my papers was, allegedly this like horrible murderer. Yeah, no, entirely. All our interactions came in the form of the class and not even like, office hours. Like it was all within the confines of a lecture hall. He was pretty strict as far as grading goes. When he came into class, he was very, not super mentally present. He would stand up at the front, look at the ground. He had a lot of like boilerplate responses he would give people rather than, maybe something he had thought up on the spot. It seemed like he would be, he'd come in knowing what he was going to say to like most interactions. And then when he would grade your papers, he would be grading you on what he ended up calling like a higher standard. But what it really felt like to us was he was grading us like he would have graded himself as a PhD student. And so that was just kind of like, we were all annoyed by him. And so I knew his name, I knew like, oh, TA Brian, like he's kind of, he sucks at this. Like he's grading us too harshly. And that was like an annoyance. But obviously beyond that, we just thought he was a little weird and kind of, you know, a bad grader. Yeah. He actually only left me good comments, which is just kind of silly. Like the only ones I could send in were nice ones, but for most people, he was being pretty harsh in the comments. I just, for whatever reason, he was being pretty good to me. Yeah, actually, we had our professor was big on the idea that like, if we're all going to be attorneys someday, then we have to know how to argue our case. And so he scheduled a day where everyone, came in ready to argue to get their grades up, and he brought in Brian and he was like, all right, go at him. And he had Brian stand up and everyone was, like a few people were on his side because they wanted to keep their high grades and not like have questions be cut out or whatever. But for the most part, it was like, half of a 150-person class just asking him all these real critical questions and he would answer. And he'd actually he tried pretty hard to defend himself, which was the kind of thing that our professor loved. He wanted the like courtroom environment. And so so there was just a period of class where we were all sort of arguing about this. Not I mean it wasn't like yelling or anything, but it was certainly conflict. Yeah, yeah, we just it would have been about a month before winter break when like the murders happened. And we didn't obviously build our framework for this around that because we had no reason to connect him to that, at the time. But definitely around then, um, he started grading everybody just a hundreds, not like you pretty much if you turned something in, you were getting high marks, and he stopped leaving notes. It was just he seemed preoccupied, is what I would have said at the time. And now obviously he seems like he was probably pretty preoccupied. But it was yeah, it was much easier. You'd turn in whatever you wanted pretty much, and he was just grading them up and sending them back. Like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. He probably that I saw he was always a little bit spotty on whether or not he'd come to class because he had, whatever PhD stuff over the top of it. But the couple times that he did come after or around that time period, I remember him, he had like a little bit more facial hair, just like stubble, but definitely less like well kept than he was. And he was a little quieter. He didn't he used to stand up at the start of class and like talk about some stuff sometimes, and this time he didn't really do that at all. He was definitely, I think, like the previous like mental preoccupation that we had been noticing, where it was like, he didn't really want to be there. That was at like an all-time high, and he just, didn't look like he was doing great.